Welcome to As We Get Older. I'm Laura Orndeff, and in this video, I want to talk about National Family Health History Day. Now, that is a big mouthful. It's a very simple concept. I believe it was in 2004, the Surgeon General established a day where families are traditionally together, just a day where the family can talk about health histories. Because you may know what your grandmother passed of, but do you know what her three sisters passed of? Just that communication where you're talking about it. And I know I can tell you in my family situation where, my father thought somebody passed of a certain disease. And when we had this conversation several years ago, everyone else was like, no, that's not correct. It was another disease. And so, memories are faulty sometimes. Nobody's fault. It's just that you want to get that correct information. And somebody record it so that others can have that information. Now, the Surgeon General picked Thanksgiving. I don't want you to get hung up on that particular day. If your family traditionally gathers the first week in August, maybe that's a good time. Or grandmother's birthday is March 21st. Maybe that's a good day. But find a time where a lot of family members are going to be there. And you want to give them a heads up. You don't want to say, hey, pass the cranberry sauce. By the way, any of y'all got diabetes? No, don't do that. You want to kind of give people heads up because they may need to look up, especially older generations. They probably documented how, your grandmother passed away, but they need to look up how the other three passed of. They're like, oh, okay, it was this, this, and this. Now, also, if somebody can't come, maybe they can send the information, you can kind of collect emails and stuff and get that information. That's also a good idea. So that way you can say, oh, by the way, Cousin John said such and such and such. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Now, I realize that some people don't want to share information. Now, let's say you've got 4 siblings. Let's say your father had 3 brothers. Let's say they're in their 75, 82 range. And maybe 3 of them, maybe your father is fine, but the other 3, your 3 uncles, have had not good colonoscopy results. So they've actually had to have some follow-up treatments. But because the way they were raised, a generation, whatever, nobody knows about it. They're not talking to anybody. So when you're going to the doctor for your colonoscopy, you're going, oh, everything's fine. But if you knew, hey, 3 out of 4 siblings had some issues, that's a huge red flag that there may be something in the gene pool that you can tell your doctor and maybe do tests a little bit earlier than normally prescribed by the standard numbers. So it's one of those, you do want people to share as much as they're comfortable. And if they're not, maybe say, this is why it would help me, and kind of appeal to the help the next generation. Now, you may get some surprises. My father, his father passed away in 1964. And 2 weeks later, my father's uncle passed away. The 2 brothers passed away 2 weeks apart from each other. And at the uncle's funeral, my father discovered that he knew his father had been in World War I. My grandfather was older than my grandmother. He had been in World War I, and he had been on the front line. I mean, he was truly front line. And he found out at the funeral his father had been gassed. He'd been gassed on the front line and had spent a long period of time recovering back in the States, D.C., Maryland, somewhere around there. Dad had no clue. No clue. And Dad was a history major, and no clue. So that was a huge surprise for him. Now, let's bring it to more of a modern situation. Let's say your father was in Vietnam, was exposed to Agent Orange. Were you conceived after he was exposed to Agent Orange? That's something you need to know, because if he were, probably you want to talk to your doctor about it. So it's one of those that, again, just talk to each other, have the communication. Now, another thing is to kind of push people a little bit. Because I know when I've talked to older generations, it's like, oh, they died of cancer. What kind? I don't know. Bad cancer? Yeah, that's not helping me. You want to narrow it down a little bit more. You also want to look at mental health issues. Now, today's world, we're much more open. There's more exposure. People talk about mental health issues. Back in the day, it wasn't discussed. It was just the way people were. And I mean, I can speak to my family. I've heard them say that. Oh, that's just the way that branch of the family was. Like my grandmother, she was one of 16 children, 14 who lived to adulthood. And pretty much most of those 14 children had a lot of children. My grandmother had 5 children. So there's a lot of people in this family. And they would say, oh, that branch of the family, they do that. That's just the way they are. As for behavioral, it's like, okay, what do you mean that's just the way they are? What do they do? And it could just be quirks. I mean, that's fine, but maybe there's a line of depression. Maybe there's some other, that wasn't diagnosed back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But it's just one of those, okay. Because you don't want to, stigmatize anybody, but you want to know that maybe there was some mental health issues. So, talk to each other, get that communication. I don't want to make, your family gathering depressing or anything like that, but you want to collect that information. And again, very important for someone to write it down and pass it around to each other. Not post it on Facebook on, oh my gosh, look at this. No, you want to do so that everyone can take it to their doctors. So, I have placed several links on my blog, including one from the CDC, one from, I think it was Cleveland Clinic. There's a few others. They've got a lot of maybe like questionnaires and questions that you can ask at the reunion or Thanksgiving or whenever. Again, don't get hung up on Thanksgiving Day, even though that's when it officially is. The whole thing is just find a time and talk to your family. If they don't gather, if everybody's all over the United States, email each other. But again, create those open lines of communication. So, hopefully I've given you a few things to think about. Definitely check my blog for those links, and I'll see you in the next video.